Thank you for tuning in to LeadDeveloper.com, where we simplify complex property development feasibilities, investment analysis, and everything real estate. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, our Google Sheets-based feasibility suite streamlines the toughest aspects of real estate. Lead Developer Feasibility Suite is trusted by thousands in over 17 countries. Our tools cover everything from quick assessments to detailed cash flow projections and more. Sign up today at LeadDeveloper.com for unlimited free access to our expanding library of real estate tools. No credit card needed. Plus, get full support through Edge with step-by-step guidance, exclusive courses, and resources designed for your success. Turn numbers into narratives that win over investors and lenders. Join Lead Developer now.
All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive on something that real estate developers use to really get an edge, and that is property options.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at an article called Property Options and Ace Up the Developer's Sleeve.
Okay.
And I think this is going to be really interesting because it's not just about like dry contracts.
Right.
It's about how developers can actually control properties worth millions of dollars with a very small upfront investment.
Yeah, it really is like having a peek into the developer's playbook.
Yeah.
Like a high-stakes game of chess.
So let's start with like the basics. Like, what is a property option?
So a property option is basically a legal agreement that gives a potential buyer the right, but not the obligation, to buy a property at a set price within a specific time frame.
So it's kind of like a try before you buy sort of thing.
It's like a test drive
for
a property.
But with much higher stakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they can sort of kick the tires, so to speak, before they fully commit.
Exactly, and that's where the power of options really comes in.
Okay.
It gives developers that chance to explore a property's potential, assess its viability for their project, even line up financing, all while minimizing their financial risk.
That sounds like a pretty sweet deal for the developers.
It is.
But what's in it for the seller?
Yeah.
Why would a seller agree to this kind of arrangement?
That's a great question. So sellers benefit too.
Okay.
They receive what's called an option fee upfront for granting that option, which can be a nice cash injection. And if the developer ultimately decides to buy the property, the seller often gets a higher price than they would have gotten on the open market.
Oh, okay. So it's a potential win-win for both sides.
It can be, absolutely.
Yeah, there are different types of property options, right?
There are.
What are the main types that developers use?
So the one that developers typically seek is called a call option.
Okay.
This gives them the right to buy the property if they choose to.
That makes sense. They want the flexibility to decide whether or not to move forward.
Exactly.
Are there other types of options that developers might use?
There are, but they're less common. So for example, there's something called a put option, where the seller has the right to force the buyer to purchase the property.
Interesting.
Which is generally riskier for a developer because they lose that element of control.
Right. So they're kind of locked in at that point.
Yeah.
So let's say a developer secures a call option.
Okay.
What kind of control are we talking about here?
Sure.
What can they actually do with that option?
So that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So with that call option in hand, a developer can essentially put the property on hold while they explore their options.
Okay.
This could involve things like conducting feasibility studies to see if their project is even viable.
Makes sense.
Applying for permits, zoning changes, securing financing for the development.
So they're essentially using that option period to de-risk the project and make sure everything is lined up before they actually commit.
Exactly.
And if for whatever reason their plans fall through, maybe they can't get the permits or the financing, they can simply walk away.
They can just walk away.
And their only loss is that initial option fee they paid to secure the option.
That's right. It's a way for developers to control valuable assets without tying up a lot of capital up front.
Now, this article actually includes snippets from a real-life option agreement.
Okay.
Which I think is fascinating. Because it gives us a peek behind the curtain. What are some of the key clauses that stand out to you in this agreement?
Well, right off the bat, you notice how much emphasis is placed on protecting the developer's interests. There are clauses that specify a very low option fee,
Yeah.
Often just a nominal amount, like $1.
$1.
Yeah.
Seriously, for a property that might be worth millions?
For a property that could be worth millions.
That seems almost too good to be true.
It highlights how much leverage developers can gain with options.
Wow.
And then you'll see clauses that grant the developer the right to lodge what's called a caveat.
Okay. I have to admit I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay.
What exactly is a caveat?
So a caveat's essentially a legal notice
Okay.
that's registered against the property's title. It's a way for the developer to publicly declare their interest in the property
Okay.
and prevent the seller from selling it to someone else during the option period.
So it's like their way of marking their territory.
It is, think of it as like putting a fence around the property.
Okay.
Legally speaking.
Got it.
To make sure no one else can swoop in and buy it out from under them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And of course, the agreement outlines the seller's obligations during that option period, such as maintaining the property, paying taxes, and not selling or leasing it to anyone else.
So it's all about giving that developer the time and security they need to make informed decisions, right?
Precisely, but it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
This particular agreement includes a clause that allows the developer to on-sell the option to a third party.
Wait, so they could potentially profit from the option itself?
Yeah.
Without even buying the property?
Uh-huh.
How does that work?
So let's say the developer, during their due diligence, discovers that the property is even more valuable than they initially thought, or that there is an opportunity to rezone it for a higher use.
Okay.
They could then sell their option to another developer who's willing to pay a premium for that potential.
So they're essentially flipping the option, much like someone might flip a house.
You got it.
Wow.
It's a way for developers to maximize their options and potentially profit from a deal, even if they decide not to develop the property themselves.
So this is all starting to make sense. It sounds like property options are all about strategy, leverage, and calculated risk. But I have to ask, how do developers even find these properties that they can secure options on?
Right.
It's not like there's a, properties with options available section on Zillow.
You're right. It's not that simple.
So how do they do it?
One of the keys to success in this game is sourcing what are called off-market properties.
Off-market. Off-market.
Okay, so these are properties that aren't actively listed for sale.
That's right.
So we're talking about properties that are essentially hidden gems.
Exactly.
Waiting to be discovered.
Waiting to be discovered.
This sounds intriguing.
It is.
What are some of those strategies?
Yeah.
What does a developer's detective toolkit look like?
Well, it can involve some old school tactics like door knocking.
Right.
In neighborhoods they're interested in sending out targeted letters to property owners.
Okay.
Or even networking with real estate agents.
Right.
Who might have inside knowledge about properties that haven't hit the market yet.
So it's a mix of pounding the pavement, building relationships, and a little bit of insider knowledge. You got it. And it's important to remember that not every property owner is going to be receptive to the idea of an option agreement.
I imagine it takes a certain amount of finesse and persuasion.
It does.
To get sellers on board with this type of arrangement.
Absolutely.
What are some of the keys to successful negotiation when it comes to property options?
That's a great question, and one that we'll definitely delve deeper into. But first, I want to touch on another key strategy that developers use when an option agreement just isn't feasible.
Okay.
And it involves negotiating a longer settlement period on a traditional contract of sale.
So instead of getting an option, they simply buy the property.
Yeah.
But with a much longer time frame.
That's right.
For closing the deal.
How does that benefit them?
Yeah, how does that benefit them?
Well, it essentially mimics some of the benefits of an option agreement.
Okay.
By extending that time frame for closing the deal, developers gain valuable time to work on the project before they have to make that final payment.
It's like buying themselves a grace period, a window of opportunity.
To
add value to the property and potentially reduce their risk.
Precisely.
Okay.
That makes sense.
They can use that time to finalize plans, secure permits, or even pre-sell units in a development. All while their capital is still relatively free.
This is all fascinating stuff.
It is.
It's like we're getting a masterclass in the art of property development.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, it can be a little overwhelming trying to grasp all these different strategies and nuances.
Sure.
Is there a way to simplify all of this?
Yeah.
To make it a little more digestible?
Absolutely. Remember that analogy the article used about drawing a picture of Brad Pitt using only gray squares?
Yeah, I remember that. It seemed a little out of place at first.
Well, it's a great way to illustrate how seemingly complex processes like property development
Though,
can be broken down into smaller,
right.
more manageable steps. Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So each gray square represents a specific stage
Yeah,
in the development process.
exactly. Think of it this way. One square might represent securing the property.
Mm-hmm.
Another square might be obtaining permits.
Okay.
And another might be finalizing the construction plans.
So instead of getting overwhelmed by the big picture,
Yeah.
developers focus on completing each square, each step,
Each step.
thoroughly and efficiently.
Precisely.
And by doing so, they steadily move towards their ultimate goal, that final image,
Right.
that completed development project.
That's it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like creating a masterpiece one brushstroke at a time.
It is, and I think it's a valuable lesson for anyone pursuing a complex goal.
Yeah.
Whether it's building a skyscraper or simply navigating the world of real estate investing. Focus on the steps, not the summit.
That's great advice. And speaking of navigating the world of real estate,
Yes.
let's dive deeper into that detective work I mentioned earlier. The art of sourcing off-market properties.
I'm happy to share some insights on that.
Excellent.
It's one of the most exciting and challenging aspects of property development.
I bet it is.
So you're intrigued by the idea of unearthing these hidden property gems, these off-market deals.
Absolutely. It sounds like a mix of detective work and treasure hunting. Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is to know exactly what you're looking for.
Okay.
What kind of property aligns with your goals? Are you envisioning a residential development, a commercial project, or something else entirely?
It's like having a vision in mind, a picture of that completed masterpiece, even before you start searching for the canvas.
Exactly. Once you have that clear vision,
Yeah.
you can start to narrow down your search area.
Okay.
Are you focusing on a specific neighborhood, a certain type of zoning, or a particular price range?
So it's about being strategic and targeted in your approach, not just casting a wide net and hoping for the best.
Precisely. And remember, this isn't just about finding any white property. It's about finding the right property, one that has the potential to meet your specific needs and goals.
Okay, so let's say we've identified a target area.
Okay.
What are some practical tactics for actually uncovering those off-market opportunities?
This is where the real detective work begins.
All right.
One effective strategy is to simply start driving or walking around the area,
Okay.
paying close attention to properties that seem neglected, underutilized, or ripe for redevelopment.
So we're looking for those diamonds in the rough, those properties that might have been overlooked by others.
Exactly. Keep an eye out for things like overgrown yards, boarded up windows, or for sale by owner signs
Okay.
that might indicate a motivated seller. Jot down addresses or take pictures of properties that pique your interest.
Like being a real estate sleuth, piecing together clues to uncover hidden opportunities.
You got it now. Once you've identified some potential properties, you can start digging deeper.
Okay, so how do we go from a list of addresses to actually connecting with those property owners?
This is where your research skills come into play.
Okay.
Use public records online databases or even a good old-fashioned phone book to track down the owner's contact information.
So it's about being resourceful and using all the tools at our disposal. But what about those properties that aren't listed in public records or have outdated contact information?
That's a common challenge, but there are ways to get creative.
Okay.
One option is to reach out to neighbors or local businesses in the area. They might have insights into the property's ownership or know someone who can connect you with the owner.
So it's tapping into that local network, that community knowledge to uncover those hidden connections.
Yeah, exactly. And don't underestimate the power of a simple handwritten letter.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a surprisingly effective way to get someone's attention and show that you're serious about their property.
It's a personal touch that can really make a difference in a world dominated by emails and text messages. But let's be honest, not every property owner is going to be receptive to the idea of an option agreement, right?
You're absolutely right, and that's where those negotiation skills we talked about earlier come into play.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are some keys to successful negotiation when it comes to property options? What makes a developer a master negotiator in this arena?
First and foremost, it's about building rapport and trust.
Okay.
Remember, you're asking someone to essentially give you control over their valuable asset for an extended period.
That's a big ask. So how do we approach these conversations with sensitivity and respect?
Start by simply listening.
Okay.
Let the property owner share their thoughts, concerns, and aspirations for their property. Ask open-ended questions and show genuine interest in their situation.
It's about understanding their perspective and building a connection, not just launching into a sales pitch.
Exactly. And once you've established that rapport,
Yeah.
you can start to highlight the potential benefits of an option agreement for both parties.
Okay, so what are some of those key selling points? How do we frame this as a win-win scenario?
For the seller, you might emphasize the upfront option fee, the potential for a higher sale price down the road, and the fact that they retain ownership of the property throughout the option period.
So they get a cash injection, the possibility of a bigger payday later, and they don't have to give up control of their property immediately.
Precisely. And for you, the developer, you gain the time and flexibility to explore the property's potential, conduct due diligence, and secure financing, all with minimal risk.
It's about highlighting those shared benefits and finding that sweet spot where both parties feel comfortable with the arrangement.
You got it. Now, it's important to remember that negotiation is a two-way street.
Right.
Be prepared to compromise and address any concerns the seller might have.
So what are some common concerns that sellers might raise, and how do we address them effectively?
One common concern is the length of the option period.
Okay.
Sellers might worry that they're tying up their property for too long and missing out on other potential buyers.
Yeah, that's understandable. How do we reassure them that this isn't going to drag on indefinitely?
Be upfront about your timeline and the steps you'll be taking during that option period.
Okay.
Offer to provide regular updates and communicate openly throughout the process.
So it's about transparency and clear communication, showing them that you're not going to disappear into the shadows with their property.
Exactly. Another common concern is the option fee itself.
Okay.
Sellers might feel that the fee is too low or that they're not being adequately compensated for granting you this right.
That's a valid point. How do we approach that conversation in a way that's fair and reasonable?
Be prepared to justify the option fee you're offering and explain how it reflects the market value of the option.
Okay.
You might also offer to increase the option fee if certain conditions are met, such as obtaining a zoning change or securing financing.
So it's about being flexible and finding creative solutions that address both parties' needs.
Exactly. Remember, negotiation is an art, not a science.
I love that it's about finding that perfect blend of logic, emotion, and creative problem solving.
You got it. And the more you practice, the better you'll become at navigating these complex conversations and securing those off-market gems.
Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about that alternative strategy we mentioned earlier, negotiating a longer settlement period on a traditional contract of sale. This comes into play when an option agreement just isn't feasible. Right?
That's right. Sometimes the seller is simply unwilling to grant an option no matter how persuasive you are.
So what's the next best thing? How does a longer settlement period benefit a developer?
Well, it essentially mimics some of the benefits of an option agreement.
Okay.
By extending the time frame for closing the deal.
Right.
Developers gain valuable time to work on the project before they have to make that final payment.
It's like buying themselves a grace period, a window of opportunity to add value to the property and potentially reduce their risk.
Precisely, they can use that time to finalize plans, secure permits, or even pre-sell units in a development, all while their capital is still relatively free.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually go about negotiating a longer settlement period? What are some key tactics?
First and foremost, you need to have a compelling reason for needing that extended time frame.
Okay.
Simply saying, I want more time, isn't going to cut it.
Right. So we need to come to the table with a clear explanation of how that extra time will benefit both parties. What are some examples of compelling reasons?
Well, if you're planning a complex development project, you might need extra time to secure zoning variances, environmental permits, or construction financing.
Those are all legitimate reasons that a seller might be willing to consider. What about if we're not planning a large-scale development, but simply need time to get our ducks in a row?
Even in those cases, there are compelling reasons you can present.
Okay.
You might need time to finalize your own financing, complete a thorough due diligence process, or even simply relocate your current residence.
So it's about being transparent and upfront about your needs, but also highlighting how the extended settlement benefits the seller as well.
Exactly. You might emphasize that a longer settlement gives them more time to find their own new home.
Okay.
Or that it provides a guaranteed sale at a time when the market might be uncertain.
It's about finding that common ground, that mutual benefit that makes the arrangement appealing to both sides. Now, I'm curious, are there any specific clauses that we should be aware of when negotiating a longer settlement period? Any potential pitfalls to watch out for?
That's a great question, and it's crucial to have a skilled real estate attorney on your side to ensure that the contract protects your interests.
Right.
But here are a few key clauses to be mindful of.
I'm all ears.
One important clause is the due diligence period.
Okay.
This gives you a set amount of time to thoroughly inspect the property, review all relevant documents, and confirm that it meets your needs and expectations.
So it's like a safety net, a chance to back out of the deal if we uncover any hidden problems or deal breakers.
Exactly. During this period, you can conduct surveys, environmental assessments, or any other necessary inspections to ensure that the property is suitable for your intended use.
It's about minimizing risk and making informed decisions. What other clauses should we be paying close attention to?
Another crucial clause is the subject to finance clause.
Okay.
This protects you by allowing you to withdraw from the purchase if you're unable to secure the necessary financing for the project.
That makes perfect sense. Financing is a critical piece of the puzzle, and it's essential to have an out if things don't go as planned.
Precisely. And it's important to be very specific about the type of financing you're seeking.
Okay.
And the time frame for securing it.
So it's not just a blanket subject to finance.
Right.
But rather subject to obtaining a construction loan for X amount within Y time frame.
Exactly. The more specific you are, the better protected you'll be. Now, in addition to due diligence and subject to finance clauses, you should also consider including clauses that address your ability to access the property during that extended settlement period.
Why is that important? Why wouldn't we automatically have access to the property once we've signed a contract?
Well, remember that the seller still owns the property until that final settlement date.
Right.
And they might not be comfortable with you coming and going as you please.
Yeah.
Especially if they're still living there or using the property for their own purposes.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So we need to have a clear agreement in place that outlines our rights to access the property and the purpose of that access.
Exactly. You might need access to conduct surveys, soil testing, or even begin some preliminary site work.
It's all about setting clear expectations, respecting the seller's rights, and avoiding any potential conflicts or misunderstandings.
Precisely. And it's another example of how successful property development is about building strong relationships and finding win-win solutions.
I love how this deep dive is revealing the intricate dance between strategy negotiation and relationship building in the world of property development.
It is a fascinating dance, and it's one that takes practice, patience, and a willingness to learn from both your successes and your setbacks.
Speaking of learning, let's circle back to that Brad Pitt analogy for a moment. How does that concept of breaking down a complex process into smaller steps apply to the art of negotiation?
That's a great question. Think of each step in the negotiation process as one of those gray squares.
Okay, I'm picturing a grid of squares again. What might some of those negotiation squares represent?
Well, one square might be establishing rapport and building trust with the seller.
Okay.
Another square might be presenting your offer and explaining the benefits of the arrangement.
Then we might have squares for addressing the seller's concerns, negotiating specific terms, and finally reaching a mutually agreeable agreement.
Exactly. And just like with that Brad Pitt picture, you need to focus on completing each square, each step, thoroughly and effectively before moving on to the next.
It's about having a strategic plan, a roadmap for the negotiation, and not getting ahead of ourselves.
Precisely. And remember, negotiation is a dynamic process. Yeah.
Be prepared to adapt your approach, adjust your strategy, and even revisit certain squares as needed.
So it's not just about following a rigid script, but rather being flexible, responsive, and always willing to listen and learn.
You got it. And by mastering the art of negotiation one square at a time, you'll be well on your way to securing those off-market gems and turning your property development dreams into reality.
This is all so insightful, but I have to admit, I'm curious about the human side of all this. We've talked a lot about strategy and tactics.
Yeah.
But what about the emotional intelligence that's needed to navigate these complex relationships and negotiations?
You've hit on a crucial aspect of property development.
Okay.
It's not just about numbers and contracts. It's about people, their motivations, and their dreams.
So let's talk about that human element. How do we as developers cultivate the emotional intelligence needed to thrive in this field? So it seems like emotional intelligence is just as important as financial intelligence when it comes to property development.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it. You're dealing with people's homes.
Their livelihoods, their aspirations.
Right.
Understanding those emotional layers is crucial for building trust and creating those win-win outcomes.
So it's not just about being like a shrewd negotiator.
Right.
It's about being a compassionate and empathetic human being as well.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that Every property has a story,
Yeah.
a history, and a connection to the people involved.
Right.
And being sensitive to those emotional aspects can make all the difference in a negotiation.
I imagine it also helps when it comes to dealing with like the inevitable challenges and setbacks that come with property development.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, things don't always go smoothly, right?
No property development is a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
With its share of highs and lows, being able to manage your own emotions, stay calm under pressure, and empathize with the perspectives of others is essential for navigating those turbulent waters.
So it's about having that resilience, that mental fortitude to weather the storms and stay focused on that long-term vision.
Exactly. And that resilience often comes from having a strong support system. Mentors, advisors, colleagues, even family and friends who understand the challenges you're facing and can offer encouragement along the way.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner reminding you why you started this journey in the first place.
You got it. And remember, emotional intelligence isn't just about managing your own emotions.
Right.
It's also about reading the emotions of others.
So it's about being attuned to those subtle cues, those nonverbal signals that can give us insights into what someone is truly thinking or feeling.
Precisely. Pay attention to body language, tone of voice, facial expressions. Are they hesitant, enthusiastic, concerned?
Right.
Those nonverbal cues can be just as revealing as the words they're speaking.
It's like learning to speak a whole new language, the language of emotions.
It is. And the more fluent you become in that language, the more effective you'll be in building relationships, negotiating deals, and ultimately creating successful property developments.
Right.
That benefit everyone involved.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive.
It has.
We've uncovered the secrets of property options.
We have.
Explored the art of off-market sourcing, and even delved into the emotional intelligence that's so crucial in this field.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it's inspired our listeners to think differently about property and the opportunities it presents.
I think it has, but before we wrap up, I want to revisit that analogy about drawing a picture of Brad Pitt using only gray squares.
I love that analogy. It's such a powerful reminder that even the most complex endeavors can be achieved one step at a time.
Exactly. And I think it applies beautifully to the world of property development. Remember, each step in the process is essential for creating that final masterpiece.
Let's imagine for a moment that those gray squares represent not just the technical aspects of property development, but also the emotional intelligence. The relationship building, the creative problem solving that we've been talking about.
I love that it's like we're adding layers of color and depth to those squares. Transforming them from simple shapes into something much richer and more meaningful.
Exactly. And by embracing both the technical and the human sides of property development, we create something truly extraordinary. Something that transcends bricks and mortar and touches the lives of those who experience it.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I encourage everyone listening to think about their own gray squares. Those individual steps they can take to pursue their own dreams, whether it's in real estate or any other field.
The world is full of possibilities waiting to be unlocked.
It is. And who knows, maybe you'll discover that you have a bit of a developer spirit within you. A passion for transforming visions into reality.
Absolutely.
One square at a time.
One square at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep those wheels turning